I talked about the different ways that we can build servers. We can bake servers or we can fry servers. When we bake servers, we are essentially baking everything into the template, everything into the AMI, and using that to launch the server. When we fry a server, we launch the server using a basic template. And then while it's launching, we apply all of our configuration changes and install new software. Well, a very common tool that we use to bake server images and AMIs is a tool called Packer. And Packer was developed by a company called HashiCorp. And HashiCorp has developed a number of tools that organizations that are following DevOps practices commonly utilize. And we've seen a couple other tools used by that Packer has developed earlier in this course. We can use Packer to create images for a variety of platforms. We can use it to create images for AWS or Azure, VMware, Docker, and lots of other different platforms. The Packer uh, tool creates an image based upon a configuration that is specified within a JSON file. And I'll show you what that looks like here shortly. Packer is a free tool. You can go to www.packer.io and download it, and it'll run on Windows and Mac and on the Linux operating system. Packer is a tool that I use all the time in my workplace. And this is a tool that's used by thousands of companies to create server images. In my case, I use Packer to create EC2 AMIs, and we use this to automate the building of our AMIs anytime we make software configuration changes. When I mentioned that when you use Packer, it's building the AMI based on this configuration file, this JSON file. Within the configuration file, you'll see two general sections. You'll see a section which defines builders and a section which defines provisioners. A builder basically describes the type of machine image that you want to create. And it also specifies the infrastructure that will be used to create the image. For example, in the builders section, you might specify that you want to create an AMI for an EC2 instance. And when you're creating that AMI, you'll define how Packer will access your AWS account and what type of instance it will create and so on. The provisioners section is describing what sorts of software components to install on your machine image. And there's a variety of different ways that you can provision software to be installed on the image. The simplest way is to use shell scripting. You can write shell scripts that install software. You've already done that in this course. You've written a shell script to install Nginx, for example, on an instance. So what Packer is basically doing is it's automating a bunch of different steps that normally you would do manually. Think about how you would go about building an image for a server. You might start by launching a new EC2 instance using a base AMI like the Amazon Linux AMI. Once that image is up and running, you would then shell into that image and then run a series of commands. You might install Nginx, you might do a Yum software update, you might install a database server, you might copy some data from an S3 bucket onto the server. So you'd run a variety of commands. And then once you've got the server configured the way you want to, Then you might shut down the server and perform a snapshot and use that snapshot to create a new AMI, right? So these are all the steps that you would perform manually to create a new AMI. All of these steps that I've just walked through are performed automatically by Packer. So Packer handles all of those different steps for you. And it does all that in the background. It's creating a new instance. It's automatically shelling into the instance and it's running whatever provisioners you want to run on the server. Then it's stopping it and it's creating an AMI based on that image. And that AMI then you can use to spin up new instances. So Packer automates this whole process for you. So let's take a look and watch and see what Packer does. I'll jump over to a terminal here. The first thing I'll do is I've got a Packer configuration file that we'll take a look at called redis.json. Let's take a look at this file. Very simple file. It's got our two sections. We've got our builder section here, and we have our provisioner section down here. I also have this variables section. We can define variables in the configuration file. In this case, I've defined two variables, which define the AWS credentials that Packer should use. So Packer is going to use my AWS credentials. It's going to use an access key that I've got set up and associated with my account. And all the resources that it creates will be created using the AWS API. The builder section defines the type of image that we want Packer to create. In this case, we want it to create an Amazon, we want it to use the Amazon EBS builder. The Amazon EBS builder will create an AMI. We want it to create that AMI in the US East 1 region. We define a source AMI. So that's the base AMI that Packer will use when it's launching a new EC2 instance. This source AMI is, in this case, I believe it's an Ubuntu server. It's a base Ubuntu server, Linux AMI. We specify the instance type. It's going to be a T2 micro instance. We give it the SSH username. This is the username that Packer will use to log into that new instance. We give it a name. This is the name that that Packer will apply to the AMI image it's creating. In this case, it's going to call the AMI jbaker-testing, and then it's going to give it a timestamp. That's what this little placeholder represents. Is it's going to replace this text with an actual timestamp. Every time Packer creates this image, it's going to create a new AMI. The AMI will have this name, and each AMI name will be unique because it has a unique timestamp in it. I specify the VPC that Packer will launch its image into. This is the ID of that VPC, and I also specified the subnet ID. So this VPC and this subnet exist within my account within the US East 1 region. And again, Packer is gonna launch this EC2 instance, and the only reason it's launching this EC2 instance is that it's going to use it to build a new AMI. After it's done building the new AMI, it's going to immediately terminate this instance. So this instance isn't gonna be long lived. It's only going to exist as long as Packer needs it to exist to configure the software and to build a new image. In the provisioner section, we have a very simple provisioner setup, and this is a shell script provisioner. And this shell script provisioner is going to run a series of commands. The first command is going to do is going to sleep for 30 seconds. And that's pretty common when using the shell script provisioner. Because there might be a short period of time when the server is still going through sort of an initial bootstrapping process. And so you kind of want it to give it a little bit of time to finish that process before you start applying things like software updates. So it'll wait 30 seconds. The next command is it'll run an apt-get update, which is just like a yum update. This command is going to update the existing packages on the server. And then finally, it's going to install Redis server. And Redis, if you recall, is a key value database service that you can run. And so it will install the Redis server on the system. And that's all it does. So once it's done running those shell script commands, then it will terminate the server and create that new AMI. So the next step is let's go ahead and build a new image using Packer. We do that by running the Packer command and specifying that we want it to build a new image using the redis.json file. So we're going to use Packer to build a new image and using our redis.json configuration. The first thing that Amazon here is doing is it's sort of pre-validating the AMI that we want to build. So we've specified that we want to use a source image, and it's this AMI ID. Packer's going to go out and make sure that that source AMI already exists. Then what it's going to do is it's going to create within our account a temporary key pair that I can use because it's going to spin up a new server using the source AMI, and Packer needs to be able to shell into that server. So in order to shell into that server, it's going to create a new key pair. And when it launches that server, it will use that key pair then to access that server temporarily. I think there is a way to define and specify like a static key pair that Packer should always use. If you don't want Packer to temporarily create a new key pair for you every time that it runs. Okay, so now it's launching a new source AWS instance. It's launching a new EC2 instance, in this case a T2 micro instance. It's adding a tag to that instance. Here's our instance ID. Okay, now it's launched the instance and it has shelled into the instance. It's updating all of the software packages. It has installed the Redis software package. So you can see it's installed the Redis server here, Redis tools, and now it's stopping the instance. So this process is pretty quick in this case, right? Now this is a very simple example. The instance in many cases, might take several minutes. It might take 5, 10, even 20 minutes to configure all the software on the instance. But in this case, we're just updating our software packages and we're just installing one new software package, the Redis database server. So it happens pretty quickly. And so once it's done installing that stuff, it's going to stop the instance and then begin creating a new AMI. You can see here it's creating a new AMI, jbaker-testing with a new date timestamp and we've already got an AMI ID. This is the AMI it's creating. It's going to take 5 minutes or so for it to create that new AMI. And once that new AMI is done, then we can use that AMI to create other new instances. So the point of this exercise is just to give you a kind of a feel for Packer and how it works. You'll get some more hands-on experience working with this in an in-class project. And again, Packer is a tool that saves us a lot of time and effort because it can totally automate the process of creating new um, Amazon machine images. And you'll see later that we can connect Packer to things like a Jenkins server, and we can connect it to our GitHub repository. So like we can make a change to our server configuration in in a GitHub repository, and that will trigger Jenkins then to build a new AMI using Packer. Okay, so in this case, our AMI has finished. It's ready for us to use. It's ready for us to launch. And then we could use this AMI to launch a new server that is running our Redis software.